The Supreme Court is weighing on a decision that could have big ramifications for President Trump's economic agenda and maybe other issues. On Wednesday, the court spent hours listening to arguments on the legality of Trump's tariffs.
The Trump administration invoked the sweeping tariffs earlier this year, justifying them by declaring a national emergency. But many justices on the Supreme Court expressed skepticism that the president has the authority to do that. The Hill writes, quote, "While Liberal justices took the lead in picking apart the Trump administration's arguments, Conservative justices Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts also scrutinised the White House's arguments that the president has authority to impose the levies based on emergency powers." The court, of course, currently has a 6-3 Conservative majority, with 3 of those Conservative justices having been appointed by President Trump during his first term.
One of the more notable moments during Wednesday's arguments came when Justice Neil Gorsuch asked about the possibility of climate change being used as a justification for the tariffs. Here was the exchange between Gorsuch and Trump's Solicitor General, John Sauer.
Could the president impose a 50% tariff on gas-powered cars and auto parts to deal with the unusual and extraordinary threat from abroad of climate change?
It's very likely that could be done. Very likely.
I think that has to be the logic of your view.
Yeah, in other words, obviously this administration would say that's a hoax, it's not a real crisis, but...
I'm sure you would.
Yes, but that would be a question for Congress under our interpretation, not for the courts.
Well, that moment was widely criticized by those who oppose the tariffs online, many raising concerns about what it would mean if future presidents could declare an emergency in the same way. Writer Pedro Gonzalez says, "This is so funny, man. The Trump administration wants to open the door for a Democratic administration to be able to declare a national emergency on climate change just because Trump won't accept that tariffs have been a disaster." Economic historian Philip Magnus writes, "Trump's admin argument implies that Congress could cede its entire responsibility in foreign policy to the president. Gorsuch is not buying the admin's position at all."
It could be several months before there's any sort of ruling from the court on this case. But the court has been asked to expedite their decision, so it is possible that we get one sooner rather than later.
Yes, so I followed this very closely. I am not a fan of the tariffs. No. I'm not a fan of emergency power stuff. I think Gorsuch asked just the question to elicit, I think he wanted that response. He wanted it for the record. The Trump administration is arguing for an executive power that could be used by Democrats for climate emergency or really any other progressive policy. I think, based on what I heard, that the administration is going to lose this one, which again goes to show how it is more complicated than just 6-3. Conservatives have the court. The people on the court are independent thinking and, frankly, more deferential to ideologically conservative principles that predate Trump. It seemed pretty clear that you had Amy Coney Barrett against this, and I think Gorsuch plus the liberals will make maybe Roberts, maybe Kavanaugh, I don't know, will make this dead.
Yeah, it certainly seems that there was a lot of skepticism, including from the Conservative majority. And there are really interesting issues within this that go broader than the tariffs themselves. One is one of the Liberal justices was saying, well, look, tariffs are a tax, aren't they? They clearly are. And the government's position is, well, no, they're not really. They're something different from a tax. But they are effectively a tax. I mean, they're a way of getting revenue for the government and getting it off private individuals. And so if you concede the point that the president can just impose this, you're essentially taking the power of taxation away from Congress and handing it to your president.
And proposals to tax must, according to the Constitution, originate in the House of Representatives. It's written in the Constitution. So that you could not have an executive. I mean, this was, if you go back to our founding documents and our founding circumstances, one of the main complaints of the colonists as they rebelled from Britain and started their own country was having taxation from the authorities without the ability of, without having an elected and a democratic body that was elected by the people, that was accountable to the people, weighing in on that issue. That was one of their cardinal problems and motivations for the rebellion, which is why it was structured so that the House, the most democratic aspect of our government must originate taxation schemes.
Right.
So this is just so contrary to that.
Exactly, because here you have a president essentially delving in and
Right.
taking those powers for himself. The other point that I think is very particular to Trump in a way is this propensity he has to believe that you can just declare an emergency in various ways and do whatever you like. And that is what he's claiming in this case. But of course, he's claiming that in various other elements of policy as well. I mean, in immigration, the Alien Enemies Act, for example, is just, well, I've decided that we're being invaded by Venezuela against really all available evidence, and therefore I'm just going to use emergency powers. There was the other thing, and I think this was in the Khalil case, where the State Department used that little part of the law that says you can remove anyone who is adverse to American foreign policy interests, a condition or a clause that was really intended to be for like major political figures who are somehow setting up camp in the United States and not random individuals who disagree with a particular administration's foreign policy. So that propensity to just lean on emergency powers and define them in this enormously expansive way, I think is very dangerous.
The scope, certainly, the scope of what's getting considered an emergency and by the Trump administration, I would never claim that Trump is the first person to do this. Every president, in my view, has kicked open the door to further executive powers. I was very against President Biden issuing a mandate for 80 million workers to get vaccinated under basically workplace safety policies, OSHA. Actually, we're going to talk about vaccine mandates, I think, coming up next on the show. So I was very against that, very against all the ways Obama and, of course, Bush massively expanded in the face of maybe you would even say an actual emergency in the face of a terrorist attack on the country and our foreign policy. But even in that case, we've come to regret, Republicans have come to regret powers bestowed on the executive in response to that emergency. Right. Now everything's an emergency. What do you think, Trump people, what do you think the next Democrat is going to do when he's in office? But I guess their view is just, well, the Democrats are going to do it anyway, so we might as well. But we're making it a lot easier for them to do it when you're coming up with justifications to do overreaching policy and then you're defending them in court. Yep. Democrats don't have to defend them in court if they've already been defended by you. Right,
exactly. And don't basically defend a principle that your enemies can then use against you whenever they get into power.
The weapons of the oppressors is my strategy if I was ever in office. But Republicans don't follow it.
Maybe it's time for the 2028 Suave run.
Can you imagine that?
I don't know that you win, but
I think I would be canceled on day one.
Coming up, the Department of Defense is establishing a pair of task forces to review its COVID vaccine mandate. Don't go anywhere, we'll be back with that.